Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about my must-draft sleeper wide receivers for fantasy football in 2021. Inside today's video, I'm going to be going in depth into 5 wide receivers that I believe to be must-draft sleeper wide receivers based upon where they are going at their current ADP. But before we get on in to the deep dive, the in-depth breakdown of these wide receivers, I would like to ask that if you are new to my YouTube channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, to please make sure that you hit that subscribe button down below. Not only is it free, I put out this content every single day to help you guys win your 2021 Fantasy Football Championship. And while you're down there, whether you're new to the channel or not, please make sure that you hit that like button down below to help boost this video up the algorithm so that more beautiful people like yourself can see today's video. I would also like to let you guys know that my rankings are available for free on awesemo.com, as well as the articles that I write every single day. The link to both of those will be down below in the description, as well as in the pinned comment of this video. So please make sure that you guys check out the rankings, as well as the articles. There are rankings for half PPR, full PPR, as well as for standard. So without further ado, let's get into the video. The first wide receiver to be talking about in today's video is wide receiver of the Miami Dolphins, Will Fuller. Underdog ADP wide receiver number 42 off the board right now. Overall pick 87.70. So right now he's sitting inside of the early 8th round in a 12-team league. So last year, Will Fuller had a phenomenal season. Was it because he was on the PEDs? I'm not too sure. Because of the PEDs, Will Fuller is going to be missing one game to start the season in Miami because of that PED suspension, and I figured you guys would want to know that before you end up drafting him. But one game in a 17-game season in reality isn't a lot when you're drafting Will Fuller to be your wide receiver 3 or 4 if you're taking him here inside the 8th round. Maybe he's your 4th wide receiver at this point, depending on how you construct your roster. In 11 games last year, Will Fuller finished as the wide receiver 32 in PPR, 28.5 PPR, and the wide receiver number 24 playing in just 11 games because he was suspended at the whole end of the season for the PEDs, averaging 17.2 PPR points per game, 14.8 half PPR points per game, and 12.4 standard points per game. Meaning, from a points per game perspective, Will Fuller was the wide receiver number 7 in PPR, tied with A.J. Brown, the wide receiver number 5 in half PPR, also tied with A.J. Brown, and the wide receiver number 5 in standard. Will Fuller was putting up big boy numbers last season, and he did it on a consistent basis, which was one of the biggest knocks for Will Fuller, because Will Fuller in the past would have these huge games where he has that game-breaking upside where he would beat a defense down, drop like 30 PPR points in a game, and then the next week, this guy is just sleeping, he's snoozing, he might end up dropping a goose egg for you where he scores like 5-6 points, and he does nothing for you, but then a couple weeks later, he'll have that boom game again. But last season, he was very, very consistent in compared to his prior years in the NFL. Last year, he had 75 targets in those 11 games, which is 6.8 per game, 0.1 off of being very nice with 6.9, ranking 59th at the wide receiver position. 53 receptions, 4.8 per game, ranking 48th at wide receiver. 879 receiving yards, 79.9 per game, ranking 28th at wide receiver for 8 total tugs on the season, ranking 12th at wide receiver. He had the 12th most touchdowns at the wide receiver position in just 11 games, and he had a 21.5% target share in the Houston Texans offense, ranking 30th with a 16.0 red zone target share. With such a low red zone target share and such a high amount of touchdowns, you can just assume that Will Fuller was beating these DBs deep down the field, and Deshaun Watson was slinging the pigskin his way. So based upon what we saw last season, with just a 1-game suspension this year, why is Will Fuller coming off the board as the wide receiver number 42? Why is he going in the 8th round? Based upon what we saw last season, he should be going in like the 3rd or the 4th round, even if he's suspended for that first game of the season. And the reason why is because of the team change, because of the quarterback change. Now, I'm not going to stand here and tell you that Tua Tagovailoa is just as good as Deshaun Watson, because Deshaun Watson, when playing, is a top 5 quarterback in the National Football League. He is one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, and there is a reason why, if all of these cases weren't against Deshaun Watson, that he probably could have been traded for multiple first-round picks and multiple second-round picks because he was unhappy with Houston. But in Miami, I believe that Will Fuller is going to have a very solid chance to succeed. Now, I am someone who is a Miami Dolphins fan, and based on what I've seen throughout Devontae Parker's career, he is absolutely not that guy in Miami. Sure, in 2019, he has that electric season with Ryan Fitzpatrick, because Ryan Fitzpatrick kind of just picks one wide receiver on the team, And then he gets those, have you ever seen those memes where the guys have the red beaming eyes? It's like the red beaming eyes. He puts a fucking sniper rifle, pointing it towards them, and he just locks and loads in on that one wide receiver. He was feeding Devontae Parker game in and game out with so many targets that Devontae Parker was bound to have an excellent season. But in 2020, we see when Tua takes over, that Devontae Parker isn't lighting it up. Who could have guessed that, right? That when a quarterback changes from a guy who is just locked onto one guy to someone who's willing to throw the ball all over the field, that things end up changing. Now, Tua Tagovailoa did not have an excellent rookie year. It was far from it. He played just about all right. But now in 2021, they get rid of Chan Gailey. They bring in Will Fuller. They bring in Jalen Waddle via the 2021 NFL draft. And I believe that Will Fuller has a very solid chance to be the #1 wide receiver on this team in targets. Now, obviously, maybe he won't finish there at the end of the year because he missed that one game at the beginning of the season. But from a per game basis, I think Will Fuller could easily be the alpha wide receiver in this offense. With Chan Gailey gone, with the double-headed offensive coordinator duo that they're running there, I think there's a very, very good shot based upon all the reports that I have been reading out of Dolphins camp with what I've seen in the preseason games, that they are going to look to be a passing, aggressive offense. They're going to be looking to take those deep shots down the field. And you want to know who's great at those deep shots down the field from the wide receiver position? It's Will Fuller. That is his bread and butter. So if I believe that Tua Tagovailoa is going to have a better 2021 season, if I believe that this is going to be a more passing, aggressive offense where Tua's not just checking the ball down like his name is Teddy Bridgewater, if he's not kind of just basically playing like a pussy, trying not to turn the ball over, then Will Fuller has a whole lot of upside in 2021. And going inside the 8th round, I'm definitely willing to take the high upside shot on Will Fuller, formerly a boomer bust wide receiver, but last year definitely kept it a little more consistent. The next wide receiver to discuss in this video is wide receiver of the New Orleans Saints, Marquez Callaway, or Marquez Callaway. I'm not too sure exactly how to pronounce your name. I apologize if you are watching this video, but Mr. Callaway of the New Orleans Saints basically came out of nowhere like an RKO from Randy fucking Orton. Marquez Callaway's ADP has shot to the moon. He went from being picked 190 in drafts on August 4th, which is basically undrafted, to today on September 1st being picked 99.90 in drafts. He is a 9th round pick at this point, coming off the board as the wide receiver number 50, and it is for very good reason. Basically everyone, including myself, just assumed that Tre'Quan Smith was going to take the throne from Michael Thomas, because Michael Thomas is going to be out a lot of games, at least 6+ games of this season. So we all thought that, hey, Tre'Quan Smith would become the #1 target there, and then maybe Marquez Callaway is the 2, or maybe someone else the wide receiver 2, but basically everyone was focused on talking up, giving the fluff up to Tre'Quan Smith. But in reality, that was a complete and utter swing and a miss, and it was a swing and a miss so hard that the ball was already in the catcher's mitt, and we're already rotating around with our bat. So it was a huge swing and a miss there, but obviously we can go ahead and correct that and talk about it now. In the last preseason game for the New Orleans Saints, which was week 2 because their week 3 game was canceled, Marquez Callaway had 5 receptions on 5 targets, 5 for 5 for 104 receiving yards and 2 total touchdowns up against the sorry-ass Jacksonville Jaguars defense. Now, I don't expect Callaway to be putting up 100+ yards and 2 touchdowns in every single game he plays on the season, but what I do want to talk about here is the upside of the wide receiver #1 in a famous Jameis-led offense. Now, if Taysom Hill was the starting quarterback of the New Orleans Saints, I would probably not be looking anywhere near drafting Callaway, drafting Tre'Quan Smith, drafting any of these wide receivers, because Taysom Hill, to me, just isn't going to be airing the ball out as much as a guy like famous Jameis Winston. I think Jameis Winston can sustain a wide receiver 1 on the team. Now, I don't expect Callaway to be a top 12 wide receiver every single week, but I do think where you're getting him, he's a solid flex option, wide receiver 3 option week in and week out, with that upside to have a very big game if Jameis is just slinging the pigskin all over the gridiron. In 11 games last year, Callaway just wasn't very good. That's why no one really expected Callaway to become the #1 wide receiver on this team. He finished as wide receiver 132 in PPR in 11 games, wide receiver 129 in half PPR, wide receiver 132 in standard. He averaged just 3.8 PPR points per game, 2.9 half PPR points per game, and 1.9 standard points per game. Meaning, from a points per game perspective, Callaway was the wide receiver 129 in PPR, 131 in half PPR, and the wide receiver 142 in standard. Having 27 total targets on the season in 11 games, which is 2.5 per game. He had 21 receptions, 1.9 per game, 213 receiving yards, 19.4 per game, and 0 total touchdowns on the team with an 8.2% target share in the offense, ranking 238th at wide receiver. So it's pretty clear that there is going to be a colossal uptick in targets for Callaway this season, while some of you guys may not be, or gals, super invested in Jameis Winston as the quarterback one, thinking that maybe Jameis will struggle. But even if Jameis struggled, I understand that Callaway, he's not Mike Evans, he's not Chris Godwin. But if you guys remember, in 2019, Godwin gets hurt, Evans gets hurt, and Brashad Perryman, who's not even good at all. He's not good at all. He was finishing very, very solid on those weeks as the wide receiver one in the Jameis Winston offense. So I do believe that Callaway has a lot of upside, and I think not too many people know about Callaway unless they are super in-depth at watching preseason or with fantasy football. Most casual players probably have no idea who Callaway is. But before we get on in to the next must-draft sleeper wide receiver, I would like to ask if you guys have ended up enjoying thus far, to please make sure that you do hit that subscribe button down below. Make sure you hit that like button as well. We need to boost this video up the algorithm so that more beautiful people like yourself can see today's video. It really does help me out a ton. Also, if you want, you use Twitter for fantasy football stuff, follow me on Twitter at NotoriousFNTSY. Next up, we have wide receiver of the Jacksonville Jaguars, Marvin Jones. Underdog ADP wide receiver, 52 off the board, overall pick 101, so he is sitting inside of the 9th round. I don't understand why Marvin Jones is being drafted behind Callaway. Callaway is a great sleeper wide receiver, but Marvin Jones should be like a 7th round pick at this point, because to me, there is a very, 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 very good chance that Marvin Jones is the #1 wide receiver in targets on the Jacksonville Jaguars. It appeared so, at least in preseason, and when you're looking at that roster, DJ Chark, Laviska Shenault, Marvin Jones, at least to me, Marvin Jones is the most talented wide receiver on that roster. And obviously, having a Jacksonville Jaguars player isn't the most sexy thing when you think about it, but neither was having a Detroit Lions player in the past. And Marvin Jones is consistently finishing inside of the top 24 at the wide receiver position, despite being slept upon every single year. If you go back to last year and watch one of my videos called Sleeper Wide Receivers to Draft, Marvin Jones is in that video, because this guy is always being slept upon and always lives up to those completely just skullfucks, surpasses those expectations that are put on him. In 16 games last year, he was the wide receiver number 18 in PPR, 17.5 PPR, and the wide receiver number 15 in standard. From a points per game perspective, he was the wide receiver number 26 in PPR, 21.5 PPR, and the wide receiver number 22 in standard, averaging 14.2 PPR points per game, 11.9 half PPR points per game, and 9.5 standard points per game. So Marvin Jones had an excellent season, despite the Detroit Lions being a complete and utter dumpster fire last season. So he says, fuck it, I want out. Matthew Stafford, probably potentially going to leave, which he obviously did. He got traded to the Rams. So I'm done. I don't want to be here anymore. I don't want to be on this dumpster fire. So he hops off that dumpster fire and lands directly into another dumpster fire, but with more promise in Jacksonville. Trevor Lawrence as the starting quarterback, and this team has a bad defense. The defense is very young. Maybe 2-3 years from now, they're the Saxonville Jaguars again. They are one of the more feared defenses in the NFL. But right now, with being so young, they're not going to be very good this season, and Trevor Lawrence is going to have to be slinging the pigskin a lot late in games, which is going to heavily benefit Marvin Jones this year, who I really do believe will be the #1 wide receiver in targets on this offense, and he is the cheapest of the wide receivers. DJ Chark typically goes about a round to a round and a half ahead of Marvin Jones. Laviska Shenault goes about a couple of picks before Marvin Jones, because Marvin Jones's ADP has risen a lot recently. If you look at his ADP chart on Player Profiler, you can see that on August 4th, he was pick 116. Today, he is pick 101.70. So his ADP is definitely rising up 8.52 spots on the last week, and for good reason, because a lot of people were thinking that Chark was going to be the guy, that Laviska Shenault was going to be the guy, and if they are, then I was wrong. But why not wait a round and a half, and get the wide receiver at the discount who has just as good of a chance as any, if not a better chance than Laviska or DJ Chark to become the number one wide receiver in this Trevor Lawrence offense. Last year in Detroit, he had 115 targets, 7.2 per game, ranking 20 at that wide receiver, for 76 receptions, 4.8 per game, ranking 22nd, 978 receiving yards, just a couple yards shy of 1,000 on the season, 61.1 per game, ranking 19th at wide receiver, and 9 total tugs with just a 20.6% target share in the Lions offense, 35th, 19.7% red zone target share, and I expect that not necessarily to go super high, right? He's not going to go up to like 35% target share or something fucking ridiculous like Devontae Adams in this offense, but he is certainly going to, at least in my opinion, which I've said a bunch in this video, in my opinion, be the number one guy in Jacksonville, and the value inside of the 8th, the 9th, the 10th round where he falls in some drafts, it is just far too juicy to wait on Marvin Jones. Whenever there is any chance that you can draft the potential number one wide receiver in targets on a team in the late rounds, you just have to take it. And like I said, on Underdog, he is going inside of the 9th round. On Yahoo, ESPN, NFL, he sometimes falls into like the 11th or 12th round, which makes him even more of a value. And on a lot of those drafts, DJ Chark and Laviska go even higher. So speaking of being the potential wide receiver number one on a roster, we have wide receiver of the New England Patriots, Jakobi Meyers of the New England Patriots, Underdog ADP wide receiver number 57 off of the board right now, making him overall pick 117, up 19.33 slots on the week, going inside the 10th round right now. Jakobi Meyers, in a lot of drafts, NFL, ESPN, CBS, Yahoo, goes damn near undrafted. He is such a supreme value now with Mac Jones taking over. Now, Cam Newton was locking in on Jakobi Meyers in the preseason, so maybe in a way it does hurt his value that Mac Jones is under center. But you can also make the other argument that, hey, now that Mac Jones is under center, it's more likely that the passes that are at least thrown to Jakobi Meyers are going to be more accurate, and there's a higher chance that the ball is being thrown compared to run with Cam Newton versus Jakobi Meyers under center, because Cam Newton runs the ball a lot himself during these games. In 14 games last year, Jakobi Meyers was the wide receiver number 59 in PPR, 57 in half PPR, and the wide receiver number 59 in standard, averaging 10.2 PPR points per game, 8.1 half PPR points per game, and 6 standard points per game. Meaning from a points per game perspective, he was the wide receiver 56 in PPR, 50 in half PPR, and the wide receiver get your kicks on Route 66 in standard. He wasn't super involved in this Patriots offense last year, but at points last season, he flashed as what could have been the clear wide receiver number one on the roster. 81 targets on the season, 5.8 per game, ranking 50th at wide receiver, 59 receptions, 4.2 per game, ranking 39th, 729 receiving yards, 52.1 per game, ranking 46th, with 0 total touchdowns and a 23.2% target share in the New England Patriots offense, 24th at wide receiver, which is crazy because 23.2% target share in the Patriots offense is only 81 targets, which I believe will increase this season with Mac Jones under center, because I think that they're not going to look to be a ultra pass heavy attack in New England, but I do believe that they're going to look to be throwing the ball at least at a slightly higher rate, if not maybe 5% higher, maybe even 10% higher of a rate this season. But I don't expect them to go full on fucking Patrick Mahomes. Well, 10% rate would be like insane jump. So probably maybe 5%, 4%. But I don't expect them to become like the Bills or the Chiefs and they're just slinging, or basically the Falcons where they just sling the ball every single play. I don't expect that out of the Patriots with Mac Jones under center, but I do expect that when I'm sitting here later in the draft, that I am, just like with Marvin Jones, trying to scope out who could be the number one target on these teams. Now, some may argue, you can say down below in the comments, maybe you think it's Nelson Agholor. And that's fine too. Then draft Nelson Agholor instead of Jakobi Meyers. But I honestly think Jakobi Meyers is the more talented wide receiver on this team, and Mac Jones will lock into him as the wide receiver number one in New England. And final wide receiver to discuss in this video. This is a complete and utter late round dart throw. This guy is going undrafted in most leagues. This guy is a rookie, 3rd round pick, a guy that basically no one talks about. But if you're in a super deep league, I'm throwing that dart because I think this guy could be the clear wide receiver number 2 in Houston, wide receiver of the Houston Texans, like I just said, because he's in Houston. Nico Collins, underdog ADP, wide receiver 88 off the board, overall pick 206, making him being drafted inside the 18th round. Most leagues do not have 18 rounds. Now, Nico Collins' stats from college aren't going to necessarily make you want to stand up aggressively and smash the draft button on Nico Collins, but all the talk out of training camp about Nico Collins looking good, how he looked in preseason, in the final preseason game of the year, Nico Collins had 2 catches for 16 yards and 1 touchdown. So while he's not necessarily going to be the wide receiver 1 there, I believe Brandon Cooks basically has that locked up, has that just in his grips. He's going to be the wide receiver 1 in targets there. Nico Collins could be, and probably will be, the wide receiver number 2 there. And in this range, in the 18th round, you're drafting guys that may be the wide receiver 4 on the team. So why not take the shot on a guy who could be seeing a decent amount of targets this year in Houston? The obvious downside to Nico Collins is who's the quarterback there. I understand that there's a lot of talk about Deshaun Watson just sitting out all season. I don't know what's going to be happening because we haven't heard one guaranteed answer. We haven't seen that he ends up getting traded. That hasn't happened yet. It hasn't been guaranteed that he's sitting, at least from what I have seen. So I don't know what to think about this offense, but what I do know is when you're this deep in the draft, fuck it, might as well take the wide receiver 2 on the Houston Texans. So thank you guys all so much for watching this video. If you did end up enjoying, please make sure that you hit that subscribe button down below. Again, not only is it free, I'm putting out this content every single day to help you guys win your 2021 Fantasy Football Championship. And while you're down there, whether you're new or not, make sure you hit that like button as well on the way out. I love you guys. Let me know what you guys thought about all of these sleeper wide receivers. Will Fuller, Callaway, Marvin Jones, Jakobi Meyers, and Nico Collins. Let me know what you guys think about them. Do you like them? Do you hate them? Or do you prefer completely different late round wide receivers? So thank you guys for watching. I love you guys all. Make sure that you stay safe as always. Goodbye.